Hello students, in this module we will be doing chapter 8 of your history, and that is the Quit India after the Quit India movement, the forward bloc and INA. We can see that all these chapters from chapter number 6, 7, 8 and so on, they are all in a proper sequence, in a serial order, or in a way you can say they are connected to each other directly. As we can say, afterwards when the second phase of Gandhi started, then how it ended up into Quit India movement. As soon as Quit India movement was brought to an end by 1943, at that time only we had this forward bloc and the INA that was led by Subhash Chandra Bose, and we do get an idea of all that during the Quit India movement. So here in this chapter we will be doing in detail about how Subhash Chandra Bose led the movement in the absence of Gandhi and the other important leaders, and even when there was no particular big movement taking place in India, at that time he formed the INA, and how this INA and forward bloc they worked, and especially INA worked outside the Indian borders and prepared for a proper freedom struggle of India outside the Indian borders, beyond Indian borders. So that is what we are going to do in this chapter. It says about Subhash Chandra Bose, his early life or introduction, and then what was the drift between Bose and Gandhi, what were the differences in the ideologies and other ways in which there were differences which led to the division of the Congress as well. And then as a division of Congress, the forward bloc was brought into action. Later we see that Indian National Army was formed with its main important objectives, achievements, and the impact of INA is also something that we are going to do. So here it's a spelling. Objectives, achievements and impact of INA. So beginning with it, let's see. First of all, we talk about Subhash Chandra Bose. When we talk about Subhash Chandra Bose, let's have a brief study of his early life. And he was born on 23rd of January in 1897 in Orissa. At that time, he was completing his studies in India. Mainly, after that, he went to to England and passed his civil services examination. So after completing his civil services examination and giving it and for qualifying for it, he later realized that he cannot work under the British government and have love and loyalty towards the nation. And as a result, he decided to leave his civil service. And he resigned it and actively participated in the movement's politics. And he became a Swarajist. At that time, he was just 24 years of age. And because he did not agree with Gandhian thought, he turned out to be a Swarajist. Bose was a man of action, and he believed that agitation and resorting to revolutionary methods was the only way of getting freedom and getting British to pay attention to their demands. Whereas this was something totally different from the ideas and ideologies of Gandhi. Here we see that Gandhi and Bose joined Congress, and as we say that he was different in ideas with Gandhi, but still initially when he joined Congress, he joined it as a part to participate in the movements which were started by Gandhi. That means he first was the person who joined the non-cooperation movement, and later onwards he also took part in the civil disobedience movement which was started by Gandhi. Later we see that he was not very happy with Gandhi calling back the movement, and as a result he felt that it is very important that the movement should go on and they should keep striking British with their attacks so that the British should pay attention to their demands. But on the other hand, Gandhi decided to withdraw it, and as a result it created a little drift between the two. Later onwards we see that the ideologies and the working methods of both the leaders changed so much that it created a huge difference, even leading to the different groups of Congress itself. Here let's read about the rift between Gandhi and Bose. First of all, Bose favored the policy of large-scale industrialization, whereas Gandhi was under the notion that the industrialization should be small scale, coming directly from the roots, from the grassroots level, and it should be every village should have a small scale industry for proper upliftment of the society. but Bose felt that large industries are those which are going to yield more and have a better upliftment and progress for the nation. Bose favored using tact while dealing with his opponents, and he did not like the way Gandhi openly discussed all the things with British even in the second round table conference. He thought some tact should have been used for properly dealing with their foes, and that was the difference between his ideologies and Gandhi's. In the Tripuri session of Congress in 1939, it was an even widening gulf because it was the difference of two wings, or you can say two wings of the Congress party were formed, and the left wing became as a forward wing. Not officially, but after this it was officially made as a left wing or a forward bloc, which was working as a separate bloc but almost very much within the Congress. So it was a wing of Congress but totally different from the ideologies of the other leaders, the moderates, or you can say the Gandhian leaders. And they also wanted to help the princely states in their freedom struggle, but Gandhi was not under this notion. That was another striking difference between Gandhi and Bose. Next is, as Britain started facing difficulties in the world scenario, fighting and being involved in the world wars, Gandhi always wanted to fight with them, but now he took a compromising nature and he thought that it is not good to take advantage of their particular situation which British were in. Whereas Bose was with the ideas that this was a God-given opportunity and we should make use of the situation by attacking and pressurizing government, so that at this moment under pressure they would listen to them and would fulfill their demands. But this was totally different from the ideas of Gandhi, which made them even go on the separate paths. Then there was a rift in the Congress, as we see, as I told you earlier, in the Tripuri session of Madhya Pradesh. Subhash Chandra Bose was in the Haripura session in 1938. So Bose was chosen as the president of the Congress. At that time Gandhi did work with him, but later onwards in the Tripuri session in 1939, Gandhi decided that discouraged Bose to participate for the presidential elections of Congress, and his particular nominated candidate was Pitabi Sitaramaiah. But on the other hand, Bose wanted to work accordingly and he stood in the elections, and most of the leaders, they did vote for Bose and he won the elections with a huge majority vote. As a result, Gandhi did not like it and he felt that, or he told all the leaders that the defeat of Pitabi Sitaramaiah was basically the defeat of Gandhi himself. This was not taken in a very good manner by most of the ministers, and they immediately, 13 of them resigned. Most of the leaders did ask Bose to get a Congress working committee only under the leadership of Gandhi, and he should be the one choosing members to it. And this turned out to be something which was a clear indication for Bose, that if he is the president, still the working committee will be chosen by Gandhi. That means his ideologies, his progress, the people will be his, everything will be under his control, and as a result Bose will ultimately turn into a puppet ruler or a puppet president, and he did not want to be a puppet ruler under the control of Gandhi. As a result, he decided to leave the presidentship of Congress, and when he resigned from the post of president of Congress, he decided to make a new wing within Congress limits, but that was going to be a totally separate wing which was supposed to be more dynamic, as well as at the same time different in the ideologies, workings and methods from the regular Congress ways. So that is how the formation of Forward Bloc was done, and here we can say the party that was known as Forward Bloc was formed on May 3, 1939. So it was in the initial months of the year only that he was elected. He resigned Congress and then the presidentship, and then reorganized a particular group, and that was the Forward Bloc. When they formed a Forward Bloc, what were the main objectives of this Forward Bloc? Obviously, the first main objective was the independence of the country, the freedom of the country from the clutches of British. But besides that, if such a thing comes, a question comes to you in exams, you can write independence of India or from freedom of India from the British. But besides that, another important thing was Attaining independence, forward bloc would work for the establishment of a socialist state, working for the upliftment of the entire social sector, the society itself. What will they do for this? There are 3 points that they had in mind. Keeping in view all these 3 points, they will be able to achieve the socialist state goal, and that was reorganization of agriculture and industrial sector in India, besides, and that too on the socialist lines. Next was abolition of all the zamindari system, because that was ruining the agriculture sector. The peasants were being exploited. And third point was introduction of new monetary and credit system, so that the loans and money could be given directly to the people, those who require it for the farming and agriculture and other various such purposes. Besides this, we see Netaji, or commonly known Subhash Chandra Bose. Subhash was called as Netaji. He was arrested in July 1940, and that too by under the defense of Indian rules. So he went on a hunger strike and his condition deteriorated. As a result, he was not put in jail, but rather he was put in house arrest in his house, and that was in Kolkata. But he hoodwinked and he disguised himself under the supervision of the vigilance of the police and everyone. He was able to escape from his house on January 1941, and from there he escaped to Peshawar. From Peshawar he went to Russia, and through Russia he was successful enough to reach Berlin, Germany. And there, when people, Indians over there in Germany received him, they called him as Netaji and assumed him as the leader of India. He also founded Free India centers in many other places also, like Rome and Paris. So after this, we see it was the events in the Southeast Asia that were stirring up the conditions, and most of the people, you can say Indians living in territories which were now captured by Japan, organized themselves into organizations in which they were trying their every bit to fight against the British and free their country. So over here, all these people, those who were like prisoners of wars, you can say it in a way, they were all brought into one particular organization. Japan had never thought it, but it was Rash Bihari Bose, who was a particular revolutionary. He got them into one particular organization, and this organization was called the Indian Independence League, and their main motive was to fight against Britain and get them away from the Indian land. As a result, we see Indian National Army was also formed through these same lines. The idea of Indian National Army was conceived by Captain Mohan Singh, who was an Indian army, who was in the British Indian Army, but later when they were retreating, he decided not to go with them, but rather he went to Japan for help, and as a result, Japan liked his idea of having a particular army of Indians and fighting against the British. So they handed over them all the prisoner of war, and there were nearly around 42,000 prisoners of war. Later onwards, it was the fall of Singapore also, and that gave them somewhere around 45,000, made it somewhere around 45,000 men. Out of these, when they had a proper conversation, nearly 40,000 men expressed that their feeling was to join the INA and fight against the British. This was even better, because now they would be having a proper British training of British arms and modern weaponry, and at the same time it was a proper organization done by the revolutionaries on a foreign land. Freely they were given practice for the war. But besides that, we can say the INA would go into action only on the invitation of Indian National Congress and the people of India. They will not themselves go and invade the country and fight with the people, but rather it will be done only when the Congress invites them. So here we see they had certain conferences to decide upon this particular matter, and they were the Tokyo Conference and the Bangkok Conference. So the Tokyo Conference, in that it was mainly due to Rash Bihari Bose's efforts that the Conference of Tokyo took place, and that was from 28th to 30th of March 1942. Both military and civil officers proceeded to Tokyo, and they met over there with the Japanese High Command, and the conference decided on the following things. First of all, to strengthen the Independence League. Second, to form the overall command of League as Indian National Army, an army for liberation of India. And the third point that they decided was to hold a conference at Bangkok and consolidate on all these points that were taken in the decisions. Next point thing was the Bangkok conference itself. So when they decided to meet and consolidate on the points, they finally met over there in Bangkok on June 23, 1942. So there were several meetings which took place, and these meetings were not taking place in different parts of India, but rather most of them or nearly all of them took part outside India, outside Indian borders, in the foreign land. So when they met over there were nearly 150 delegates from different parts of the country, different countries, Malaya, Singapore, Burma, Thailand, Hong Kong, and they all came together and they passed many resolutions. Out of these resolutions, the important ones are, first, they decided that they would be inviting Subhash Chandra Bose to come from Europe and lead this particular movement. Also, formation of a council of action to control and guide the whole movement was to be done. And then elections of Rash Bihari Bose as the president of the council was conducted, and Captain Mohan Singh was appointed as the captain in charge, or the commander in chief of the Indian National Army. Later onwards, we see the biggest change was when Subhash Chandra Bose arrived and he reached Singapore through the Russian and Japanese submarines. And as he reached over here, he took control over or in charge of the Indian Independence League, and later onwards he also took part of this particular thing, Indian National Army, under his supervision, and became the supreme commander-in-chief of this group. So it was in August 1943 he took charge of the Indian National Army, and he set up the headquarters of this particular organization in Yangon and Singapore, and recruits were made out of civilians and all the people, those who were offering themselves to be a part of the INA. He also made a particular women regiment, and this women regiment was led by Dr. Lakshmi Swaminathan, and besides that, various other people got into this movement and they all joined, and it was now a big organization which was being formed to fight against the British in India, but the organization was being formed outside the land of outside the Indian land. Now, what were the main objectives of INA that we'll see? The main objectives was, first of all, to organize an armed revolution and fight the British with modern weaponry. Second was, since it was not possible for Indians to organize armed revolution from their homeland, the task must be assigned to Indians who were living abroad outside India, particularly on Indians living in the East Asia. So those countries which were in Eastern Asia, and there were many Indians or people living over there from India, they were supposed to be taking part and helping the people to organize this particular group for the liberation of India. Total mobilization of Indian manpower and money for a total war, and organized provincial government of Free India to mobilize all the forces effectively. Besides that, the motto of INA was sacrifice, faith, unity, faith and sacrifice. You might be asked what was the motto of this particular organization. So you should be giving the answer as unity, faith, sacrifice. So these three words were the main motto. Besides this, we see provincial government of Free India was set up. Now here we see the interesting thing about Indian National Army was, it was an army which had no food, clothing, weaponry, planes, tanks, lorries, anything. For all these things they depended on the other countries, from Japan to Thailand to Singapore, all their weaponry and things. As a result, when this particular organization was made, it was one of its kind, where various other countries helped Indian people to build up a particular organization to fight for their freedom. Subhash Chandra Bose set up provisional government somewhere around, of Free India somewhere around October 21, 1943 in Singapore, and then declared war on Britain and US. This provincial government was recognized by most of the countries in the Axis power and their satellites like Japan, Germany, Italy and Thailand, Myanmar. All these countries accepted this particular provisional government as the government of Free India. And the major task of the provisional government was to launch and conduct struggle that would bring the expulsion of the British and their allies from the Indian soil. That means the freedom of India in gist, we can say. So here the main thing was to establish a permanent national government in Azad Hind, Free India or Independent India. Subhash Chandra Bose also at this time gave the call to his soldiers, and that is a famous slogan that he gave, and that was, "Give me blood and I shall give you freedom." He also had various war cries like Dilli Chalo as well as Jai Hind. So these became the battle cries and the motivational slogans for the soldiers to fight for the freedom of their motherland. Then next point we have the achievements of the Ina and Netaji. Ina made preparations to launch its first liberation of India and went into action somewhere around February 1944. And Ina captured Modak and even which was an outpost in Chittagong, then now it is in Bangladesh, and advanced up to the frontier of India. So they were almost reaching towards the border of India, fighting over there with the British to liberate most of the territories, Indian territories, from the British rule. They also captured military post of Klang. The INA gave a tough fight to the British even in the territories of Assam, and when they fought, they even got the territories from Assam of Ukral and Kohima, and these were the places where the first time tricolor was hoisted in the on a free Indian land or in a liberated Indian land, and this was on March 19, 1944. But this all these victories and the success stories were not very long lived. They were short lived because soon Japan was engaged in a face off with America in the Pacific region. They had to go back. Besides that, the army which was there still, they had to go back because of the rainy season, and as due to the rainy season they had lack of resources, and therefore they had to call back their soldiers. And besides that, we can even see that Japan during this time, because of certain activities around 1945, all these Second World War activities totally made Japan to surrender in the World War scenario. And by August 15, 1945, Japan had surrendered in the World War, and therefore this surrender of Japan also sealed the fate of INA, and now once again British recaptured all the territories that it had lost earlier. So therefore the leaders had to go to different places. Netaji also left Rangoon and for Bangkok, and from Bangkok he was flying towards Tokyo. While he was flying to the towards Tokyo, it was considered, and it is given as an official statement in the Japanese newspaper, that his plane crashed and he died on August 18, 1945. Though there was a lot of speculations and suspicions over there, but we are not dealing with that. What the official statement was given was he died in the plane crash on August 18, 1945. Lastly, we see the impact of INA. So I'll read it out for you and explain. The revolt of 1942 and the INA had revealed the heroism of Indians, and how with the end of the Second World War and release of the national leaders from jail, the people began to look forward to another, perhaps the final struggle for freedom, because the important leaders were already imprisoned by now. So now they were being released. So they felt that already INA has done a lot of you can say impactful work, and so the main leaders, when they'll come, they'll make the situations even more favorable. The INA inspired uprisings in the armed forces of the country. The Indian naval ratings in Mumbai rose in revolt in February 1946. Similar uprisings took place in Kolkata, Chennai, Karachi. The naval revolts shook the foundation of the British Empire. And now the new struggle took the form of a massive movement against the trial of the soldiers and officers of the INA. The government decided to put a trial in the Red Fort in Delhi, and officers of the INA like Shah Nawaz Khan, Gurdial Singh and Prem Sehgal, who had earlier been officers in British Indian Army, they were being tried over there. The people welcomed them as national leaders. British were bringing them as the terrorists, but people were recognizing them as the national leaders and heroes. Demonstrations demanding their release were held all over the country. People were all in favor of these, you can say, warriors. So the British government was at that time in no position to ignore Indian opinion, because they themselves were having a lot of problems because of the Second World War just coming to an end, and even though the court-martial held the INA prisoners guilty, the British government had to set them free. They were not killed, they were not given any particular punishment. The INA set an inspiring example of patriotism for all the people at that time, and that is why it became an important chapter in the history of Indian independence struggle. And all thanks or all credits to the contribution of Subhash Chandra Bose, making the prisoners of war into the national heroes and making a small organization as an important part to, you can say, sum up the freedom of the country at that time. So with this, we come to the end of the module as well as the end of the chapter. In the next module, we will be doing the question answers related to this chapter. With this, we come to the end. Thank you.